It is really my pleasure to welcome you this evening to the launch of Erna's latest offering on the literary landscape. We take great pride in welcoming new books produced by Jamaican writers and by none other than a friend of our department, somebody who has been a writer in residence in our own department, publishing the latest Nothing's Matt. And so I just want to say to you a warm welcome. This is going to be an easy movement. I will not stay here and say too much. I will just be guiding things along, and we should have a delightful evening hearing about this new publication and hearing Erna read again. This launch is brought, when you have a big writer like Erna Bradber, you know, one department can't be behind the book launch. So we will find that this evening, this launch is in collaboration, the Department of Literatures in English in collaboration with the University of the West Indies Press and with the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies. And therefore we bring the might of three institutions behind this publication. So I want to welcome you here. I noticed that there are people coming from as far as Australia, Erna, to this launch. I will not call any names, but there is a wave. I see people from other institutions, but of course we know those people belong to us. Mico University College represented. We see the former deputy principal. I mean, Erna brings out a huge support, and of course, Professor Emeritus Eddie Bowe and Sheila Bowe, Velma Pollard, always here, and so on. I welcome you all, each one of you, to this celebration of the literary work. Unfortunately, Professor Meeks is unavoidably absent, but sent his congratulations and his support for this launch of Erna's book. And so we will not have greetings brought from Salises, but we will move right now into a group I've become fond of, especially at launches, which is Rosina Moda, sometimes with friends, sometimes with family. We never know what will turn up, but we know that we're going to have a delightful performance, and I ask you to welcome now Rosina Moda and family. you, Joel, and Mom and Dad. This evening, it is my pleasure to introduce to us the main speaker for this event. The guest speaker this evening is no stranger to the Department of Literatures in English. Delia Harris is a first-class honors graduate of UWI who did a double major in Literatures in English and Media and Communications. We will not spend too much time on that other major, Media and Communications. She was one of our prize winners, and I remember her first assignment done in the first class I taught her, and there were many others after that first class. And that assignment was so brilliant that I had to read it to the entire class and to make copies. That paper was a model of sharp, critical thinking and crystal clear writing. Beyond us, she's a well-known face of Jamaican television, working as host for a variety of programs. I think I can say this without any contradiction, that she has the classic smile of Smile Jamaica. We also know her as a budding theater director and writer of plays. She has participated in many a production, and we know that with such productions as God's Way, Jamaica Torarted, and To the Finish, she has already made a mark on the landscape of Jamaican theater. She was most recently Principal Director of Culture in the Ministry of Youth and Culture, and a well-known marketing and communications consultant. I'm happy to welcome you back to the core of your being, the literary world, and we look forward to hearing your introduction of Erna's Nothing's Matt, which I gather is quite something else. Welcome, Delia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Butner. Although with an introduction like that, I probably should just plead Chick V if critical thinking doesn't present itself throughout the presentation. Our guest of honor, Dr. Erna Brodber, other distinguished members of the audience, and I won't try to name them individually because as I look across, I see many distinguished persons here. A pleasant afternoon to you all. When asked by the department to speak at today's launch, I have to be honest, I had a moment of panic. Because how do I, in front of such an accomplished group, deliver a competent, if not marginally satisfactory presentation on a work of such an outstanding author? Then I read Nothing's Matt, and that is where my problems really started. Because there was so much that could be said about the work, it would require more than my allotted time for presentation, but Dr. Buckner warns me he will pull my shirt, so I will make it brief. Now, I thought maybe I could discuss Brodber's exploration of sociocultural genealogy and the ways in which family trees are often pruned, transposed, uprooted, replanted, and in some instances seem totally disconnected, yet below the surface, interlocked roots betray their common heritage. In commenting on the protagonist's A-level research paper in the novel, and this was based on her family history, the tutor writes that the literature speaks of the West Indian family as fractured, but that she might be able to prove that it is fractal. In broadening the family construct, taking into consideration the influence of our colonial and post-colonial experiences, Brodber engages in open discussion regarding unique family histories, supporting what Amy Smith in her work, Tracing Family Lines, argues is an easier approach to both understanding the socially constructed world in which family ancestors lived, as well as seeing the impact those social constructions have on today's family members. When we talk about Flexi Week and people are up in arms, John Cross said they don't work on Sunday, so you're not going to get some Jamaican people because of how the social constructs have conditioned them to ever work on a Sunday. My grandmother on a Good Friday would have a fit if we lifted a penny, and I thought that it was just some spiritual or religious reason until 2 weeks ago I visited my aunt and she said no, her father worked on Good Friday and he had an accident at work and died, and so she insists that no work be done on that day. So when we hear even our young people, they do a survey and they say they want to migrate, and we get up in arms because why do our young people want to leave this country? We have a history of migration in this country. And so we often participate in national discussion about social behavior, about distinct ways communities, parishes, and even Caribbean nations respond to ideas and concepts, the difference in how they approach certain issues. But how often do we recognize that those responses stem from decades and centuries of social conditioning, which must be factored into contemporary approaches if they are to be resolved? Nothing's Matt can contribute significantly to the way we undertake national and regional dialogue to advance the notion of integration as we continue to define ourselves as post-colonial nations. I also thought of raising Brodb's treatment of the protagonist's journey and the way in which she patterns it in a linear yet roundabout and ultimately cyclical way. Princess's safari through the forest created by the many trees and branches of our family history provides an opportunity for silenced voices to emerge, for buried stories to become unearthed, creating a maze which compels the reader to become an active participant in Princess's adventure from her past into the present and the future. As the stories move back and forth in time and space, they weave the smaller patterns of the characters' lives into the larger form of the mat. But Brodb binds the characters' lives so tightly together that the reader is not allowed to dismiss or forget them as the narrative progresses. You can almost not help yourself but to take out your pen, and I did, and literally the paper, responding to an impulse to decipher, to draw this family tree, and that you become so invested in its secrets almost as if they're your own. And is it your own? Because Brodb's stories conjure up familiar memories of whispers between aunts, hushed conversations between neighbors, a slip of the tongue by a spiteful villager, overheard discussions in the wee hours of the night when adults think children are fast asleep. All families have secrets. This, ladies and gentlemen, is another reason why Nothing's Matt is quite something. On seeing the title of the novel, I thought, okay, a mat, so that's the thing you wipe your feet on and you leave the dirt before you go into the house. Now, while having read it, the title became clearly defined, I can't help but still hold on to the notion of leaving dirt in the mat, or in another way, of looking at secrets. Now, they say a secret remains a secret until you make someone promise never to reveal it. And Brodb's characters never keep their promises. There's a modern definition of tea, which refers to gossip or personal information belonging to someone else. The scoop, news, it signifies a piece of sensitive and possibly highly sought after information or tidbit. And Erna Brodb spills not just ordinary tea, but some real Jamaican, grate it, boil it down, sweeten it, then make sure you don't burn your lips kind of chocolate tea. In this era of reality shows and scripted series, Nothing's Matt rivals the steamiest of plots, dishing out a delectable meal of siblings who aren't really siblings, siblings who are but never find out, infidelity, lust, treachery, betrayal, served with a long glass of deception in a classy charcoal, which on the color chart is not too far from gray. And isn't that the beauty of the creative work? For as Brodb in her own words admit, while the historian, having collected his data, leads them to move logically to a conclusion, the creative writer can impose his own sense of justice, his own feelings upon the data, and guide them to a conclusion which accords with his prejudice. Chronological family history is disjointed, then rejoined in a fashion Brodb designs to not only stimulate thought, but to also delight the senses. As they would say in Jamaica, nothing's mad, talk up the things. And while some secrets are quite painful, releasing them allows Princess to truly understand, to gain that sense of belonging to a family previously connected to her in name only. And isn't that the debate that continues to rage in our own society? Why do we need to look back at the atrocities of slavery? Why do we need to recognize the struggles of our ancestors? Some people don't dare reference their own life in rural Jamaica because there's a reason why I live there. And sometimes when we're figuratively told to go back where we come from, we don't understand that literally that's where you are from as well. So, what are the silenced, hidden stories that we need to release so that our own national and individual sense of belonging may be realized? Alas, Princess too gives birth to her own secrets, for she has learned the art of deception, but she knows that someday, somehow, the secret must come to light. Dr. Broadbaugh, congratulations, and thank you for gifting us with this powerful narrative. I am very fortunate that my years of work in the media and my studies here at the university have equipped me to craft the most appropriate way to salute you this afternoon. And so I say, Dr. Erna Broadbaugh, you're good bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Delia. I sat there with great pride. You see what I'm talking about? Yeah. Yes? It's now another pleasure of mine to introduce another student of ours, Joel, who is now going to perform a piece that he has composed specifically for Erna. He's a former student of Erna's workshops, and he's going to play that now. Welcome, Joel. could we give another round of applause to this multi-talented young man? Becomes my pleasure again to introduce to us the author, a person who needs really no introduction. I could tell you that she's the honorary visiting fellow at the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies this year. I could tell you she was a writer in residence in the Department of Literatures in English the former year. I could tell you that she's a graduate of the University of the West Indies and that she's published 5 novels of significance. I could tell you that she has the Order of Distinction, Commander Class, from the government of Jamaica. But I want to tell you a personal story of how the impact of creative writing can lead to multiple ripples across the world. Mayal, published in 1988, I read it perhaps about 1990, 1991, and the first conference paper I prepared was on that novel. That novel shook up my literary studies in a significant way. And after reading that novel, that has stood out as one of the most significant pieces of Caribbean writing, in the way that it informs how to read literature carefully, perhaps critically, perhaps politically. And it was my awakening as a reader of literature to think about the politics of the written word. And so, 6 or 7 years later, I'm at the University of Western Ontario, and I'm teaching my first year of teaching at the university level, a course in Commonwealth literature, in which I started with the Caribbean, since that's where I'm from. And it was the most exciting class I had because most of the students had come from across the Commonwealth, and they were bringing a personal interest to the study of that course. I made that book really the core of the course, and I think I started with Mayal because I felt we needed to teach students of how to read. Just last year, I stumbled upon a reference, he did not send it to me, he did not tell me, of a student who was in that class. His name is Eddie Kent, and he published last year a book entitled Corporate Character, Representing Imperial Power in British India, 1786 to 1901. In it, he pays this tribute, and I quote, "My earliest academic debts are to Michael Buckner, who inspired me to study imperial literature." But really, underneath the name Michael Buckner is really Erna Bradber. It was Bradber at the core of that course that taught Eddie how to read literature well. And to me, creativity, inspiring creativity, is at the core of what writers do. And I must say to you, Erna, that the many students who you meet in your workshops and who carry on that creative spirit, I say, let it flow, let it flow. I introduce to you award-winning writer, eminent scholar, Erna Bradber.
Well, am I to say wagwan or just greetings? Well, greetings massive. Thank you, Michael, for the good things you have said, and so forth and so on. Well, about 4 years ago, I came to a launch. Let me just say this is part 1 of 4 points I want to make, and I hope I make them without boring you too much. About 4 years ago, I came to a launch like this, but hosted only by the Department of Literatures and English. Rosina Moda and Company performed. I told those around me, and of course myself, that I was going to write a piece which the Department of Literatures and English would want to launch, and at which they would invite Rosina Moda to perform. Well, hopes realized. Thank you very much, Rosina, and thank all those people who were responsible for inviting Rosina to help me to have my hopes realized. I need to thank Delia, whom I watch nearly every morning on, what's it called again? Smile Jamaica. I won't ask her the question she thinks I'm going to ask her. I told her I wouldn't ask her that question, but I'm just going to thank her very much for having read my stuff and come and give such a nice and high-class analysis. High-class, accent on high-class. Okay. Then Joel, nobody has ever sought to compose, write to anything for me. I hope this is the beginning, Joel. Thank you for kicking it off. Okay. I'm a certain ancient age by now, but I'm still hoping that other things will be composed. All right, then. All right, the second part is about the nothing in this slim volume, Nothing's Mat. Because so many people have asked me about it, I think I would like to say something to you about it. Yes, the Nothing in Nothing's Mat takes me into my family archives, and enough of them are here to vex with me, if vex is the word. Okay. My father was born and grew in Blackstonedge, St. Anne, where he married and produced my big sister. 3 years later, he moved his family to Woodside, St. Mary, about 10 miles away, where I was born. He was very particular about keeping his roots in Blackstonedge and would from time to time hire a car to take us back there, where we would reconnect with Aunt this and Uncle that, be kissed and examined to see what long-dead relative we look like. Once he sent my sister and I by ourselves. We walked the 10 miles, shortened by walking through the bush. The resident aunt told us where to find the relatives, and we dutifully went to be kissed and our features examined to see what old dead we resembled. Our aunt told us that we really should be seeing Connaught, but it was too late since we had to start on our way back home. Now, big sisters are sacred in my family. And I would like you to help me to give thanks to my own big sister who is here today. Velma, do you mind standing? The cover of this book here is a mat in my big sister's house. Okay. And the photograph is by my big sister. You won't find it anywhere in this volume, so probably you better write it down for yourself. Okay. But I had to tell you. Okay. Now, my father's big sister lived up the road from us in the same village. Manners decreed that we had to stop at her house before going to our house to report on our visit. We mentioned that we couldn't see Connaught, and she said, "Oh, cousin Nothing," and assured us that Nothing was indeed our kinswoman's name. My big sister was hysterical and could not stop laughing, whereupon something very odd happened. My aunt's husband chased us out of the house, telling us, known to ourselves and the whole village as well-behaved children, to take our bad behavior to our own house. I never did meet Nothing. In this work, I tried to reconstruct Nothing and build a monument to her. The third part takes us to fractals. I'm sorry Dr. Cooper is not here, but anyhow. She invited me to her Global Reggae Conference, where I heard Horace Campbell's paper, in which he declared that Rasta cannot die because it is built on the principle of fractals. Now, given my interest and my involvement with Rastafari, I wanted to know more about fractals, this thing that would make Rasta, with which I was involved, live forever. I went to the computer and found some of the most hypnotic shapes I've ever seen. I had to hold on to myself, for these shapes were threatening to take away my will and pull me into the computer to live with them. I bothered everyone about fractals. My son introduced me to his mathematics test, in which I learned that the fractal was a mathematical concept. I was ready to sign up for CXC Maths. Then I met a real mathematics professor who told me that it had to do with the African knowledge system. Africa, oi. I was drawn further in. A colleague in a Canadian university, Andrea Davis, feeling sorry for my demented state, sent me the book African Fractals, where I saw what my uncle, whose father, my maternal grandfather, who died when he was 5, had told him about the Ashanti, whom he had reluctantly fought on behalf of the British. I saw women's hair woven in the same design as that of the roofs in their houses, as my grandfather had told his little son. Then a new and very kind conference colleague spoke with me about and sent me her paper in which she, a geographer, was analyzing Wilson Harris's literary works in terms of fractals. Enter my young Jamaican friend of the Ifa tradition, who told me in her inevitable way, dash with all of that, the term refers to a form of African divination. Funny, there was a time when I was intent on getting to Nigeria to steep myself in the study and practice of African systems of healing. Was this a time? Was that what this fractal obsession was about? Me finding my way to Nigeria and to my own interest in African spirituality and systems of healing? There was no funds for that, so I had to find a different and better way of handling my obsession. Why not write a story which observed the principles of fractals? That is, a set of self-similar shapes, different from each other only in scale. That was more within my possibilities. With this, Nothing's Mat was conceived. In my creation, Nothing, Connaught, is very knowledgeable about the things of nature and transmits this knowledge to a young visiting relative who is trying to study the West Indian family by an examination of her own Jamaican family. Without studying any book or going to post-elementary school and probably not even confident about spelling mathematics, Nothing arrives at Fibonacci's sequence of numbers. Each number in this series is the sum of the two before it. Thus you have a series 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. Mandelbrot, centuries later, took things further. Things of nature, such as plants and flowers, observe this sequence. One leaf or petal or whatever comes into life, then another one, then 1 + 1, 2, then 2 + 1, 3, then 3 + 2, 5, and so on. I spent hours tracking down and examining plants to see if Mandelbrot knew what he was talking about. Others have extended this finding. Nothing, my cousin, is one, and my fictive cousin is one. She adds that things whose development observe this principle are God-blessed and good for the human being. Thus she shows her cousin Princess the pinguing maca, which can yield strong fiber for man's use. He can use these fibers to, among other things, create a mat on which to sleep, to walk, to cover him from the sun and wind. The crafting of such a mat observes the process of recursion, going back Fibonacci's way, to go forward, going back to go forward, spiral, going back to go forward. Okay. Nothing takes Princess through the process of selecting the plant, processing it for fiber, and making the mat. As they work at creating the mat for the set, Nothing tells her about her relatives. They give names of relatives to the various small subsets, which, when put together, is the family mat imbued with the spirit of each relative. Point 4 is where I reach, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do here. I want to read, but the thing about it is that when you're reading from a novel, you're not reading like the poets read. You bet a poet can read 4 lines and give you the whole story. See? So when you give me like 5 minutes to do something, it can't work. It really can't work. So I'm just going to do what my spirit tells me to do. And what my spirit tells me to do is to read 2 pieces. Okay? I'm going to read a small section, which is a unit in the mat, which represents more than her spirit. And after that, a section which I think you can observe the self-similar units, distinguished only by scale. Now a word on the second reading before I go into it. A smaller unit of the family mat is joy. We're going to read Maud, and we're going to read a bit of joy. Princess's grandmother, Pearl, had been in Panama, where she had met and married a silver man from America. You know that we were silver. In Panama, we're called silver. She had refused to go to the States with him and was returned to Jamaica with their 2 children. In Jamaica, she eventually marries Neville, whose name you will hear in the first reading, and produces Princess's father. The 2 children, by the American, were sent to their father in the US, where one of them produced joy, the joy that you read about. Now I'm going to read the piece that has to do with Maud. It's kind of, yes, it's kind of not for children. It's not my kind of writing. A reviewer once asked me, very close person, very nice person, I just forget his name now, why isn't there any sex in my work? Well, reading from Maud. Out of the blue, Miss Maud had bawled out to her charge, "Girl, I breed, you breed? You think me not see the lizard jump on you?" Just talk to you, but you're coming late. The girl's response was to shake out her dress, for she was mortally afraid of lizards. From that day, Miss Maud watched her like a hawk. Nobody had bothered to tell her how old she was, and since birthdays were not things celebrated there, she could not say, Mary is having her sweet 16 party, I'm the same height as she, so I must be about 16 too. What she knew was that she was out of school. That meant that she was a big young miss. If there was a younger child in the yard, she would have a handle put on her name. She'd be Sister Clarice or Miss Clarice or even Cousin Clarice. As it was, her guardian rarely called her anything but Gal. Another day, Miss Maud crept up behind her and shouted in her ears, You see your health? She didn't feel sick, so she said yes. It was not the time when people talked about fallopian tubes and eggs in the womb and penises. Nobody had ever told her about blood coming at certain times from the same general place from which pee came. She had since last Christmas been having the blood as well as pee. She had told no one, for this was not the kind of thing that a decent girl talked about, and all girls were decent. So there was none to say to her, this happened to me too. She had simply put dry banana trash in her step-ins until it stopped. She hadn't needed to do this for some time, which meant to her that she was indeed now seeing her health. No blood was coming. It was at this late stage that the lesson came. When blood had come out of your cut, you're healthy. When it now come, something wrong with you. She was really feeling bilious lately, and there was no blood. So perhaps she was not healthy. But she wasn't going to tell this to Miss Maud, for Miss Maud didn't like sicky people around her. She called them delicate alabaster baby. She didn't want to be called that ever again. She wanted to be strong like Miss Maud wanted her to be. Neville was her good friend, but not even he knew of the blood thing. They played that game where they showed each other their private parts and even tried to join them after Neville told her that she had a hole there. But she never did that when there was blood. She just said, I can't play today, and it never urged her nor was vexed. On one occasion when they were playing that game, Mas Eustace, whose ladder butted Miss Maud's, jumped the barbed wire fence and came over, claiming that he was going to tell. They couldn't at first imagine what he was going to tell, for they were not stealing cane or ripe banana or anything like that. And they had not harmed anybody's fowl or goat or anything. They were only sharing what was theirs, their bodies. Whereupon Mas Eustace asked them what they thought Adam and Eve were doing when God chased them out of the Garden of Eden. Before they could tell him that it was an apple that Adam and Eve had stolen, and they had stolen none, it wasn't even apple time, he told them it was not an apple, it was what they were doing, and he would tell Pastor who would drive them out of Christian Endeavor. Christian Endeavor was a big deal. Only well-behaved children were in it, and you wore a special ribbon on your shirt or blouse and marched into the church after all the elders were seated. Pastor would beam from the pulpit and say, give the young battalion the way, let them come in. Nobody wanted to be driven out of that. They wouldn't do it again, they pleaded. Mas Eustace no way to stop him from talking. Clarice should link with him this one time and not do it again. Neither she nor Neville saw anything difficult about that, and so Mas Eustace lifted up Clarice and put her legs around his waist, telling Neville to turn his back, which he duly did. It was different from with Neville, for a kind of glue was left at the top of her legs which she had to wipe off, and he was now telling her that she should not tell Miss Maud about this. This glue didn't happen with Neville, nor did he make up his face and grunt like Mas Eustace was doing. Everybody kept their word. No one was driven out of Christian Endeavor. Neville and Clarice never tried to link again, and of course Miss Maud heard nothing of the affair. Nor did Mas Eustace ask for a repeat, but from that time Clarice never had to use the dry banana trash in her step-ins again. In those days, women were not showing off their breasts and their legs. Clothes were worn loose. Clarice had had no occasion to see all her body. There was no full-length mirror around, or to strip off all her clothes and see herself. One simply tidied the crucial part with a soaped piece of cloth and a pan of water. She therefore did not see that her breasts were swelling, nor that the bottom of her belly was increasing and getting stiff. There was never any need to go to the dressmaker to get measured. Clothes made for her were not part of Clarice's life. There was a church basket with very nice, almost new clothes coming in from all parts of the world, and definitely in style. More often than not, they were a little bigger than Clarice's real form, if fitting well was important, and it was not. So nothing was really too tight for her. It was when the baby was squirming out of her, a 7-month baby, that she screamed, knowing full knowledge that she was unhealthy. She was in the latrine and might have pulled out the stuff looking like a young dog that was sticking out of her and thrown it in the latrine hole if it had not cried and Miss Maud had not forced her way in. Miss Maud asked her what was wrong. Clarice said, "Nothing, ma'am," for she felt quite all right in her body, just emotionally upset that this thing had come out of her. Miss Maud had a sense of humor, and for all her gruffness, tons of humanity. She checked the little thing and said, "So this here something with 2 legs, 10 toes, and 10 fingers, and a head is nothing? And that your baby name, girl?" After that, when people said they hadn't seen Clarice in some time, was something wrong, Miss Maud said, "Nothing wrong." In those days, women didn't go down the street pushing their bellies out and their navels sticking out like the lid of a pot. People didn't go around announcing the birth of a child unless the union between the parents had been blessed by God in the church. In this case, a blessing would be very long in coming, for Clarice couldn't, and Miss Maud thought wouldn't, even reveal the name of the person who had put the seed in her womb. So a marriage was totally impossible. If Miss Maud were of a different class, she would have found discreet transportation to take Nothing and her mother out of the district and to her mother and aunt or whoever. But she wasn't. So people couldn't avoid hearing a baby cry and couldn't help but know that a baby existed. When they asked questions, was Clarissa all right, or if what was making that noise, Miss Maud said, "Nothing," leading people to make comments like, "Nothing over Miss Maud, a ball. Here, nothing there, ball." It was Parson who forced himself into the house, ostensibly to find out why Clarice was not a Christian endeavor. It was he who described linking to her and asked her with whom had she linked. Neville's name came up, and so did Mas Eustace. Parson preferred Mas Eustace. Neville was a little boy, not even out of school as yet, and had got a half scholarship to a little-known private school, but high school nonetheless. His parents were solid members of the church. Parson didn't want to spoil his future nor the reputation of his family. He wasn't even asked about his role in the linking. It was Mas Eustace whom Parson confronted. Yes, there had been that link, but had only been on one occasion, just one, so it could not be his seed that had borne fruit. They could give the baby his name, but they would get nothing from him, nothing. Miss Maud wouldn't take the name, so the baby took her and Clarice's last name, Walker, a name she had given them when they came into the village. Miss Maud, Clarice, and the baby were the big joke in the village. Naturally, the name Nothing stuck to her, even though she had a birth paper which said June. That is... This is Joy now. This is a Joy mat. See them here? I postponed my tutorial and went to collect my cousin from the airport. I had had pictures of Joy as a big woman, but these were just visa-sized photographs under which her articles in Essence and Ebony were placed. And they were always the same one shot. You could see that her hair was sold, but there was nothing else very distinctive. I had sent her a full picture of myself with my hair cornrowed. She knew me. I did not know this aristocratic-looking woman who rushed with open arms to me after she exited the terminal. Joy was very, very light-skinned. Is Professor Lewis female? Maureen? Maureen. Me and color again. All right, okay. Joy was very, very light-skinned. I remember the story of how grandmother had reportedly used Everett's color to turn down his offer of help with the business. And I wondered what color must have her first husband have been for her to produce such a fair-skinned grandchild. And how could she have a light-skinned husband and at the same time think of people like Everett as her enemy? Pearl would have to answer this question in time. Of course, I did not know Joy's mother, but I did know from my understanding of the American society and from Joy's report concerning the troubles of her cousin brother John, that she was not likely to be so white as to by herself have given Joy this color. For now, my main worry was having a pregnant woman in the house that supposedly did not like women. The one thing I knew was that she wouldn't be told about the house by me until I thought her system could manage this. I could not forget Keith and how his mother's cravings while he was in the womb turned him into a dasheen. Pregnancy is such a delicate thing. I shelved my worries and wonders and did the right thing. I took my cousin to see her grandmother and to eat the repast that was waiting for us. Pearl was beside herself, even in tears. I felt a little snubbed. I'd never had a greeting like this from her. Of course, she had never seen this grandchild before, never even seen John, the child's father, since he and his sister went to their father in their 20s. This 80-odd-year-old woman thought she could convince Joy to stay with her. I looked at Joy. I didn't know if she had been in touch with her grandmother and confessed her pregnancy to her, but I certainly had not told them anything about it. Joy looked at me and saw that I had not told them, and she said she didn't think she would stay with them but should visit often. Then Grandmother Pearl did a stupid thing born of jealousy. How could you give up the offer to stay in this nice house with a full-time helper and hot water, air conditioner, and all the things you're accustomed to in America, to live with your cousin in our old wooden haunted house? Joy smiled but didn't answer. It was later in her life that I realized that even if Joy had been tempted to stay with Pearl and Neville before the talk of my house, she could not resist my wooden haunted house. Joy had come to me to experience on her behalf and on behalf of her unborn baby all that she had read about Jamaica. And that, of course, is rural Jamaica. We all know that. Rural Jamaica. That is not in the script. I'd be just talking that. She wanted to be shut in for 9 days after the baby's birth. She wanted him or her bathed in a pan with a silver money in it. She wanted to drink, how dreadful, castor oil to help the baby through the passage. She wanted to drink mint tea and wanted the afterbirth planted under a tree here. She wanted folk things that I had never heard of. No cesarean section for her. She wanted to push out her baby herself and wanted it delivered by a local midwife. She, only having read about these things, was sure that a house cleaning ceremony would clear away any bad spirits. When she actually got into the house, she declared that there was no bad spirit there. If they had been there before, they had vanished at her coming. It was then that I learned that we in Jamaica were not the only people who had crazy ideas about the supernatural. Joy, for all her aristocratic look, had had a spiritual advisor right there in Washington, D.C. He totally approved of her coming to me, and she had been blessed with olive oil and even goat's blood right there, the capital of the most significant country in Christendom's world. I introduced her to the mat. In fact, I told her it would be by her bedside. She sat on it, rolled on it, and said, "This is what Vincent saw." This Vincent was her spiritual advisor, and she added, "The only thing is that I'm to stay away from the flesh of chickens while I'm here." I thought I had told her about Nothing's revelation concerning my eating of the flesh of fowls, but clearly I had not. So I told her and took the opportunity of introducing her to the people in the mat and their stories. My cousin was so taken with these stories that I was forced to remember that she was a writer and one with contacts who might publish her family story before I could get around to it. I got diplomatic and told her, one day after the baby and all that, we must get together on this project. I don't walk barefooted. My aristocratic high-brown cousin did. You see, the earth has all sorts of beneficial properties. It is sacred. Why else is it called Mother Earth? Pity and gratitude had sent me to visit Everard, and I had found him in the same Golden Age home in which he had put his father. At Easter, we take Easter bun for him. At Christmas, chocolate tea and platt bread. With him, I had walked out the brother part of the cemetery at the home. Brother is a euphemism for the part of the cemetery where those who really don't belong, whether by not being christened Anglican or by having been a charity case, are buried. And we did find Samuel's spot and a little marker that Everett had placed on it, so we were friends. But I hadn't managed to get him to come back to the house, which was now mine, and which I suppose, from what he had told me, held a lot of pain. It was on one of these days when this brown cousin of mine was walking with her planters and 10 toes on the earth, sucking up all the goodness from Mother Earth, that Everett chose to visit. I saw the shock on his face and took him to my bench in the maze to regain his composure. "It will be all right," he said. "It won't happen again." And I knew what he was talking about. He had just seen his mother in her final days, brown like my cousin, in the flushed beauty of pregnancy like my cousin, barefooted like my cousin, and perhaps dressed like my cousin, for Joy did wear some long, expensive-looking Indian cotton outfits, which looked just as out of step with my yard as those of Doris, daughter of Captain Smith, must have looked. I knew, too, that he would be praying to his Christian God for us, and that all would be well. He asked questions such as, "Is she looking after herself?" I knew what that meant, and I could tell him that the seer never left us, and had even found a midwife for us. I didn't tell him, though, that I had gone further than that for a bush of ears and wall of eye. What I wasn't telling anyone was that I had found a gynecologist obstetrician for my cousin. She was quite content with the midwife, but I was not. I'm a Monday, Wednesday, Friday teacher, and I took my cousin in with me on Fridays, ostensibly to see her grandmother and to help with the grocery. The boy whose eyes used to follow me around was back, and he was a gynecologist. I had to get Joy to believe that my taking her to Junior was a ploy for me to try my hand at getting him to notice me. He quite understood. Nevertheless, things started to happen for us too, so that those Fridays on which he poked around in Joy's privates became days of peace, love, and excitement for the three of us, as lunch and laughter usually followed the gynecological examinations. Then another lovely thing materialized. His good friend, whom I knew only by sight, took to being part of our party. Junior felt that we shouldn't be driving so far out of town by ourselves on these Friday nights, and his lawyer friend began to accompany him on the drive behind us to my house, 20 miles away from the college campus and our city. Sometimes we stopped on the road to eat. Sometimes they ate at my house. Sometimes they even stayed over to enjoy the company of these weird cousins. And the cousins got more weird. I had heard of men having sympathetic reaction to the pregnancy of their wives. Never thought it would happen between friends and cousins and of the same sex. If you hadn't been told that my cousin was pregnant and 5 months gone at that, you would not know, for the telltale signs of pregnancy, the big belly was not a thing for Joy, though Everett, accustomed to seeing his mother pregnant, had guessed incorrectly. All Joy had was a spread of hips, but if, like all of us, you did not know how her hips were before, you couldn't even know that her hip size had changed. We had to take her word for it, that there was this new spread of hip, and that was due to the making of a baby. I, on the other hand, was having difficulties getting my skirt to hook, and my blouses were gaping in front. It was Junior's stupid name for a big old doctor, who noticed the change in my body and laughingly said that I looked like I was in the early days of pregnancy. The weight wouldn't go off no matter how much walking I did. So it was I who looked pregnant. Looks were one thing, I could manage that. What was a bother was the sleeping. Even in classes I was sleeping, so that my students were sorry for me and asking if the driving to school wasn't getting too much for me. They seemed to believe that I was indeed pregnant, certainly in some delicate physical condition. Joy decided to help me. She was as qualified in teaching Black history as I was, and more popular than I, for several in Jamaica and among my students knew of her articles in Ebony and Essence, and were very happy to have this personality in their program. So here was the pregnant one full of energy, and the non-pregnant one at home sleeping away like a proverbial bear hibernating. Junior said that every woman carried her pregnancy in her own way, so it was not odd for Joy to be so active. The odd creature was me. I think I would have completely lost it if the nothing in my womb had taken to kicking me. This was the point at which we shifted, she finally showing the signs of pregnancy. And of course, Joy was not quiet about it, motherhood being such a natural and happy community affair. Anybody's hand was invited to feel the kicking. Jeremiah was called in from his farming task to put his hand on Joy's belly and feel the kicking. And this child felt as if it were not just kicking, but running down the football field and heading ball. I was glad I was not asked to share this aspect of pregnancy, but I tell you, when the birthing time came around, it was I who was dilating. I shared this with Junior, who took the opportunity of arriving at facts about my sex life, which I didn't intend to reveal to him. What I was feeling was not dilating, but a sexual craving. And he said knowingly, "You mean you have never felt this before? My dear virgin, you're as the man in the street would say, juicing." I made up my mind to say nothing more, but juicing or dilating, both he and the Nana, Miss Sislin, started asking about baby's clothes and the arrangements of the room for the delivery. I was in the room for the birthing, and I can tell you that I felt pain. I will not say that I felt as much as Joy, but I know I felt pain. Joy's daughter came out and was wrapped, and without being cleaned of all her blood, put on Joy's chest. All the pain left her face. I felt it continue in mine. Then the oddest thing happened. Have you ever peeled a tangerine and found at the top of the pegs a whole little set of tangerine pegs? This little set of pegs looks just like the normal set of pegs, except for their size. They're about 100 the size of the real tangerine. It used to delight me to see this extra little set. I used to call them the tangerine's babies. Joy's daughter was, they said, a normal 8-pounder. The afterbirth would not come. As Miss Sislin took the baby off Joy's body to clean it, she was shocked and disappointed to hear the good, mild, and decent doctor blasphemously say, "Backside, I can't believe this," and order Joy to push again. As if Joy were a pit, the two of them, Junior and Miss Sislin, were peering into her now distended privates and pressing the top of her stomach. Out came a little something, no more than 3 pounds, but crying as loudly when slapped as the 8-pounder had. "I never expected this either," was of course Joy's comment, for she had noticed Junior's shock. I was reminded of her grandmother's stories of her baking and how she would make miniatures of whatever order she was filling for her own children. Judd and Sally, who would put these on their own latter, and she would stick this in the oven with her other things. Herbert had mentioned her doing this for him and Pauline, though grandmother had not mentioned this to me. I suppose she wanted John's daughter Joy to feel special. Grandmother and her flirting again, and me and my jealousy again. Well, here was the miniature, and I took Joy's comment in the same light, something specially arranged for the immature who cannot do it all by themselves. Princess, this is yours. She had taken to calling me Princess, following Junior. Luckily, she didn't know that sometimes under his breath it would be Princess Virgin. He joined in. Princess, you have been carrying this pregnancy too. This is really yours. Miss Sislin said nothing. Looking after 2 babies was more rewarding financially than looking after 1. But I stumbled, I'm not prepared. Nonsense, says Junior, I'm here. Am I not to profit from this harvest? I have no children. This is the parson's cake. For Joy's sake, he explained. At every wedding, there's a special little cake sitting on top of the layers of cake. This one is for the officiating priest. He can take this and go away without the beauty of the real wedding cake being disturbed by cutting before time. Joy breastfed both babies for a time. Then, true to Jamaican custom, the father, Junior, started arriving with store-bought food and, of course, clothes for the babies. He had suggested that I try breastfeeding, but I refused to carry our weirdness this far, though my breast did feel heavy and my blouses were again not able to be buttoned in the front. Junior was very often in the house. He had virtually moved in, for babies have to be walked about in the nights to stop them from crying. And I was a working woman who had to be rested enough to drive 20 miles to work and back. Miss Sislin was able to take Joy through all the folk things she wanted to experience, even as I fed it on the baby's hair. And of course, she very early took the babies off store-bought food, and they were drinking the juices of the fruits and vegetables coming from Jeremiah's efforts on my land. Our boy didn't go through all the folk things, though, which Joy ushered her baby, through which Joy ushered her daughter. But he still grew, and by leaps and bounds. By the time he was 3 months old, he was the same weight as his sister. Here endeth. And having gone through fractals for about 2 or 3 years, I hope you see the self-similar but different sizes. This is what I read this for, self-similar but different sizes.
Thank you so much, Erna, for giving us a taste of the book. And so I hope that you know that the books are available. You can get them signed as soon as we are out of here. And we'll be out of here in a few minutes. We're going to invite Erna to come back to present books to different representatives of different libraries. We're going to begin with the UWI Main Library, the National Library of Jamaica, the Jamaica Library Service, and the Calvin McCain Library of the University of Technology, in that order. The representative from the UWI Main Library. Thank you. Someone from the National Library of Jamaica, a representative. I gather the representative from the Calvin McCain Library isn't here, and so we ask now for the representative from the Jamaica Library Service. Thank you, Erna. And thank you all. Now it's just left to Linda Speth of the UWI Press to bring closing remarks on this wonderful occasion, and I just invite Linda at this time.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening. As the General Manager of the University of the West Indies Press, it is within my remit to offer congratulations and to extend thank yous involved in the publication and launch of a book. First and foremost, of course, congratulations to Dr. Erna Broadbear for her novel, Nothing Matt. The press has only recently begun publishing novels. In fact, Nothing's Matt is only our fourth contemporary novel. We were particularly interested in Nothing's Matt because it's not only a fine work of fiction, but it also portrays a fascinating ethnographic perspective regarding the diaspora, fractal rather than fractured West Indian families, and kinship networks, topics of profound interest for both the general public, scholars of Caribbean cultural studies, and students of the same. It was a pleasure for us to publish this fine work, and we share the sentiments of people at the recent Caribbean Studies Conference in New Orleans, the LASA Conference in Puerto Rico, and our friends on Facebook who praised the slim, elegant volume. I would also like to thank our co-sponsors tonight, the Departments of Literatures and English, and the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies. We look forward to collaborating with these two units in the future to make more books available to the public and to the university community. We also thank Rosina Moder and friends, and Joel, and family, the University Press Marketing Department, the University Bookshop, and our very, very, very dear friends who show up to every event, MITS. A very special thank you also to Velma Pollard, who provided the photograph of her Matt for the cover, an appropriate familia offering for a book about family. The printed book is available for sale tonight at UWI and Kingston bookshops, and electronic versions are also available in the Kindle and Kobo stores worldwide. Thank you. Enjoy.